Jesus took his 3 closest friends up a mountain, Mount Tabor, and before their eyes he was transfigured. They saw a dazzling light which blinded them. They saw a cloud and were very much afraid. It is the story of the Transfiguration, a story that impresses everyone who hears it. The blinding light, the voice, the cloud, and the fear. It was on the Feast of the Transfiguration, 1900 years later, that another dazzling light appeared. On that day, too, the people were very much afraid. But how different was that light? It was at 8:15 in the morning, August 6th, 1945, that the atomic bomb was dropped on the civilian population of Hiroshima in Japan. Once again, people saw a blinding light. Once again, people were terrified. But how different was that light? It was not the light of the Transfiguration, manifesting the glory of God, but rather a darkness disguised as light, manifesting the inhumanity of man. The fireball was 18,000 feet across, and we are told that the radiance and the temperature were like 1,000 noonday suns. In 9 seconds, the city was gone, and all was fire. 140,000 people perished. Perhaps the most perverse thing about that act was how it was couched in terms of endearment, and yes, in terms of religion. Its first test code was named Trinity. The base the plane took off from and returned to had the code name Papacy. The test's success was reported back to the president with the code words, "Babies satisfactorily born." The bomb itself was known by the code name of Little Boy. The code name for the bombing mission was a smile. It was called Dimples. The plane from which the terrible bomb was dropped was named after the mother of the pilot, Enola Gay. But perhaps the most perverse disguise of all was that the day of the Transfiguration was chosen. That day, when the glory of God was revealed, the terrible darkness of humanity was also revealed in a way never before seen in the history of humankind. Albert Einstein was one of the greatest minds of all time, and one of the scientists who had developed the technology that led to this day. When he heard what had happened in Hiroshima, he cradled his head in his hands and kept crying over and over again the old Yiddish phrase of lamentation, "Oy vey, oy vey." Of course, Pope Pius XII immediately and strongly condemned this act of inhumanity, and that condemnation has been repeated by every pope since. Pope Paul VI referred to it as a butchery of untold magnitude. Paul VI was to die on this day, the Feast of the Transfiguration, the anniversary of the bombing. Traditional Catholic morality has always condemned in the strongest terms any means of warfare that wipe out whole cities, that kill thousands of non-combatants alongside legitimate military targets, or that deliberately target ordinary people in order to break the enemy's will. This is under no circumstances acceptable, and whether it is done by the so-called good guys or by the so-called bad guys makes absolutely no difference. In 1978, Bishop Maurice Dingman wrote, The very existence of the human race is in jeopardy. We must halt the arms race in the spirit of Tabor, or proceed with the armaments race and face annihilation in the spirit of Hiroshima. Two events, two blinding lights, two groups of frightened people. Yet how incredibly opposite were these events. The light of Tabor was not a light of destruction, but a light of self-giving, a light of elevation. The ancient philosopher says, we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when adults are afraid of the light. But we are all afraid of the light. The apostles were afraid of the light on Mount Tabor. It was blinding them. The people of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Dresden, Hamburg were with good reason all terrified of the light that was enveloping them and obliterating them. The awesome light of the Transfiguration showed the capacity of the human to be raised to the divine. The terrifying light of Hiroshima showed the capacity of the human to be lowered to the inhuman. It was the deepest darkness in the disguise of the brightest light. We often ask for light, but light does not equal sight. We can be completely bathed in light, whether it be physical light, intellectual light, or the light of doctrine, only to find that it is precisely that light which has blinded us and at times destroyed us. It is vision that we should seek, a vision that is able to penetrate life's deepest darkness as well as its most dazzling light. If we cannot encounter one another, encounter ourselves, encounter God in the desert darkness, in the pains and tears of life where we are most at home, how can we ever expect to experience such an encounter when we reach the overpowering light of Mount Tabor? If we cannot prevent the light of proud intellect, the light of technological advance, from blinding the eyes of the soul, if we cannot voluntarily and permanently extinguish the false light of horrific modern weaponry, then that light will transport us and all of humanity, not to the divine glory of Tabor, but to the satanic hell of Hiroshima. The choice is ours, and it is urgent and unequivocal. It is the 11th hour. From the cloud, the voice of sanity, the voice of God is repeated, perhaps now for the last time, pleading with a humanity armed with its own false light and blinded by its own false pride. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him.